Welcome to the World Cup Mood Board on 99.94. Yes, I'm in my car. I apologize for anyone who doesn't like carpool karaoke or, I don't know, was it comedians in cars getting coffee or whatever? It is what it is. We're in a car. Let's start with the Dutch, because they've obviously for a long time been a rewarding team to get invested in. Combination of the orange kit, the fondness for embarrassing England, and they have 2 wins, and they are most likely going through to the next round of this tournament. And now it's just hopeful that they get to play England at one stage for their potential 3rd victory over England at a world tournament. Um, uh, Again, though, didn't they make it difficult? In fact, they're making it incredibly difficult in every one of these games. To be fair, it ended up a second time when they should have won easily, and they kept the neutrals involved, didn't they? Just by not being very good, not being very good in the chase. It's kind of remarkable. I think I said this in the last chase. They've got Roelof van der Merwe and Tom Cooper and Colin Ackerman. Uh, there's a lot of skill in that middle order and experience and T20 runs. I mean, there are top level T20 teams who are probably looking at this, international teams going, I wish we had that kind of skill and experience in the middle order. And the Dutch team seem to not be using it at all so far. But Baz the leader, again, I feel like I'm singling him out all the time, but bowled well, was there at the end with the bat, top effort by him. And so that's all good. I would say that despite the fact that they are unbeaten, I think if you're a Dutch fan right at the moment, you're probably in near, I don't know, permanent cardiac arrest. I'm not sure really what to make of this team. No one is scoring on them, so that's great. But when they make their own chase, they kind of turn it into their own personal gornography movie. That's gornography, by the way, in case you thought I said something else then. I think it's going bad, though, when you're batting, that twice your teenage spinner has had to save you, to help you. Also, just one other thing about the Netherlands, they've played a lot of cricket against good teams. They've probably had more cricket against top class teams than they ever have in their entire history over the last, year and a half. You would expect them to be a little bit more smooth with the way that they're playing. At the moment, they're a little bit like Bambi on ice in a chase, if Bambi on ice was being actually chased by polar bears. Namibia's old friend, the slow scorers, turned up again today. They were saved by a great effort from their lower order in the previous game. But this time, that slow scoring top order that I've talked about so much, that everyone's kind of aware of at the moment, really came back to bite them. It was completely exposed. They even had a bit of a rejig with their order, but nothing seemed to really work. However, again, it says a lot about them that they made this game close. It didn't really feel like it was going to be for a long time. And by it says a lot about them. It says a lot about their bowling and their fielding. It started with a run out, of course, so you have to mention their fielding, but also the field placements, the general ground fielding, and the way that their bowlers don't give anything away. They're very good. Their bowling and fielding team is carrying a lot of water for their batters at the moment, and they're probably going to have to continue to do that because, quite clearly this is not the strongest batting lineup out there. But it is also worth looking at what Namibia did in the first game. I've kind of already said my stuff on this, but here is the great Neil Manthorpe and Lungani Zama talking about that first win.
Result. They didn't just squeak past them, they beat them by 55 runs. They're the Asia Cup champions. Namibia opened the tournament with a commanding victory by 55 runs against Sri Lanka.
An incredible amount of ambition going through Namibian cricket. They might not have a lot to choose from, but the players that they choose from for Namibia are strong, hardened cricketers who hit the ball hard, who field well. I think what was most impressive about their win over Sri Lanka today was just how well they held their catches, they held their nerve, and in the field, when they had half chances, they turned them into dismissals. And hopefully they cause a few more surprises in the tournament, because the game needs it, and it needs more heroes, and it needs more competition and rivalries. And when a young nation like that comes up and does the hard work and starts getting the rewards, it's encouraging.
It was certainly brilliant to watch today. It was the fourth highest victory by runs by an associate nation against one of the elite teams.
Yeah, the whole thing is remarkable. It's worth going and listening to Manners. Great pause on Manners' face there, by the way. It's worth going and listening to Manners and Zams over on the South Africa 99.94 podcast. But the interesting thing about this is I picked this anyway just because I wanted them to put some perspective onto what was going on with Namibia. With South Africa being the closest team to them, and I mean, in some ways, Namibia is basically a domestic team, or has been certainly a domestic team for South Africa quite a few times. But everything Zam said about that team still sort of resonated in this game. They just didn't win this one, which was the only difference there. For those who don't know, there are a precious few actual top-level cricketers in Namibia at the moment. And so for them to play this good level of cricket again against the Netherlands, I think is outstanding. Netherlands coming off that incredible year of cricket, and Namibia just, picking the only sort of able-bodied players that they have available to them. But let's go to Sri Lanka. Because Sri Lanka actually won a game, and that on itself was completely noteworthy. Obviously, Nasanka made the runs. They were cruising for a long period. I think they'd probably be disappointed with the amount of runs they made in this particular game. I think they were tracking. I thought they were tracking around a 180, 190 score. Obviously, the hat trick changes that quite a bit. But they won the game easily enough. And certainly, I don't think they sorted their net run rate, but they definitely got it back to where they would have wanted it to be after a game like this. And that was down to Chamira, who bowled very, very fast. And for the UAE players, they're not as experienced, even by associate standards. It's quite a new team. A lot of players in development coming into the team over the last 3 or 4 years. And they didn't play in the last World Cup. They just haven't played enough, proper quick bowling. And I thought that was always going to be a bit of a problem for them. I actually saw, I think, some of the Sri Lankans talking about how Chamira was going to be very handy in the early rounds because of the fact that the other teams, the associate teams, aren't as good against high level pace. Weirdly enough, that's not probably the case with Namibia and Netherlands. Netherlands have a few quicker bowlers themselves. Namibia would have faced a lot of quick bowlers when they're in South Africa and playing games against the South Africans. But UAE is the team for that to happen. So well done to, what does it say here? Just realized that it's just it's a newspaper headline that we have and just fake. That's going to annoy Muku now that I've pointed it out. But on to Kartik Mayappan. Before this tournament, I picked Mayappan as one of the players to watch. I mean, there's a certain point where you kind of do that with the UAE team just because they're not particularly there's not that many players to pick from. However, I remember I saw his numbers first and I thought, well, okay, he hasn't played a lot of games, but he is averaging 14. Then you start to look into it and you're like, well, he's had a couple of good games against Ireland, but Ireland not particularly the best team against leg spin. And then you think, wow, they're going to be throwing this guy in. It's going to be tough for him. You see him in the first game against the Dutch. I think he started a little bit poorly in his first over, if I remember correctly. Pulled it back a little bit. I thought bowled quite well there. And then we have a look at him in the next game, and he's certainly already looking like a much better player in the next game. Even against the Dutch, it was that spell, the sort of second spell that he bowled, really allowed them to pull themselves back in and almost win that game. But this is obviously completely different. Taking that hat trick. Also, look at the batters' names here. These are proper players, right? This isn't just a random selection. He hasn't gone through the tail. It wasn't completely at the slog part of the game or anything like that. This is good bowling. He's a really, really interesting find. I think he may have actually played himself into something. We don't know what the future of UAE cricket is. It's so up and down at times over there, but he's probably played himself into a few more franchise leagues, or at least in the conversation for those. He is playing. You can see this tweet here. I think this is from one of the teams in whatever that league is called, the UAE Emirates League thingy. There's so many new leagues, and none of them seem to have very memorable names. What happened to the Georgie Pie Super Slam and those sorts of things, or the Ram Slam? Those are good names. Anyway, the new league, he'll be playing in that. It'd be really interesting to see how he goes. I do think, though, a lot of people already have their eye on him. And, another strong performance from him in the last game, which is going to be the UAE's last game in the tournament, will really be quite interesting to see if he can make a little bit more noise up there. But I thought he bowled very, very well. Reece Topley. This is written by Charlie Reynolds, who has this real thing against Perth. So I'm going to read this line as Charlie wrote it. As if arriving back in Perth wasn't enough for England to be dealing with, they've announced that Reece Topley is an injury doubt ahead of their opener against Afghanistan. So Topley has rolled his ankle in a fielding drill before yesterday's warm-up, and he'll be assessed throughout the week. He's been one of the better England players. I know he's not a huge name, but considering that they're a batting dependent side, they're already without Jofra Archer. I'm not sure they're quite sure about the Wokes, Willie, Chris Jordan grouping. Like, I think Topley was the one that they had a little bit more certainty about. So it's quite a big deal, I think, for England for this not to happen. And also, if you go back, a big reason they didn't win that last World Cup is because they had 4 or 5 top-level injuries. They're already up to 3 injuries so far. Now, Topley might be fine. He might only miss a game, might not even miss anything at all. But we are getting to the point now where it is a bit of a problem. Obviously, Tamal Mills and Richard Gleeson, both good players to be able to come in. Tamal might come in because he's obviously another left-hander like Topley is. But yeah, the whole thing is, it's a little bit interesting. Also, just a complete aside, Charlie, my co-writer, is currently on a flight from the UK out to Australia for the World Cup. And about a year ago to this day, he was very drunk in a pub and completely sledging Don Topley for no reason for hours on end. I notice he hasn't put that in the script. But England's 11, just because of what happened last time, again, I think it would be unfortunate because I think from 2016 through to now, they've probably been one of the strongest T20 sides in the world. And we've only had 2 World Cups, and it's a possibility that they just won't have enough of their best players available to them. But hopefully with Topley, that's not the case. Okay. At the end here, this is a little bit weird, but today, John Cena, do we call John Cena a wrestler or actor now? I don't really know what the official title he has anyway. On Instagram, he tweeted a picture of Glenn Phillips. It's a very good picture of Glenn Phillips. In fact, it's the same picture of Glenn Phillips that I think we used recently for something, or a similar one anyway. I don't know why this has happened, but it is some of the best PR that probably the World Cup has had for quite some time. When we talked about Glenn Phillips recently, it was about the cockeyed length of Glenn Phillips, of which he was caught saying on the stump mic. I don't know if John Cena is a big fan of that or not, but weirdly enough, he wasn't even the only wrestler / actor / famous person to be talking about cricket, because The Rock also did this. Okay.
Collide, the world will stand still. This is more than just a cricket match. It's time for India versus Pakistan. The greatest rivalry.
So the main reason I find this funny, other than the fact it's also random and obviously just a bit of PR for Black Adam, which I haven't seen, but he seems to be doing a lot of PR, so I'm assuming the movie's not going. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm assuming the movie isn't selling itself. It needs The Rock to go around the world and sell it for it. But the other interesting thing I find about all that is I did the exact same trailer back in, 2016 World Cup. Except instead of doing that, it was like instead of being India, Pakistan, we changed it and we made it into, whatever game was playing that day, New Zealand, Sri Lanka or something like that, it's a little bit of a shame that no one told The Rock to, pick a different game. It would have been great if he went all the way through that. And then at the end, he said, Namibia, UAE. But sadly, that did not happen. That's the end of the main part of the show today. I'll just see if there's any comments about. Let's see what we have here. Keshuva says, do you think Netherlands still has less chance than Namibia to make it to the next round? Look, I haven't, Keshuva, I haven't had a look at the table that closely, but my memory was that I think actually it might be on one of the stills that we might have used, but my memory was that the Netherlands are running quite low on net run rate. So, their future's in their hands, I suppose, at a certain point. If they beat Sri Lanka, then they go through. And if they keep the game really close against Sri Lanka, I suppose they also go through. But they've got to make some runs either way. And it's not that Sri Lanka look like they're flying either. Oh, look at Muku. Look how skillful he is. Of course, I can't read any of this now. But, yeah, so Sri Lanka, what are they about? And are they carbon neutral? Sri Lanka by the look of this, and Netherlands, yeah, you can see they're not too far above carbon neutral there on the net run rate. So Netherlands certainly still have a chance. I like the fact that Netherlands have their future in their hand, but I think that they will, if they don't get through and it is a net run rate thing, I think they're going to be really annoyed that twice they were chasing a run of the ball and they kind of went nowhere. EKG Canadian enthusiast says Sri Lanka won, obviously, and even the best teams have bad days in the Namibia match. Sri Lanka will beat Netherlands. Lol. I mean, they might not. They've got lots of flaws going through this team. To think that they're one of the, I mean, they've got a 50% win-loss ratio over the last year and a bit now. They're not one of the best teams. So they are an inconsistent team. I would certainly have them favored over Netherlands at the moment, just because I haven't seen the Netherlands really fire with the bat yet. And I think that if Netherlands were firing with bat and ball, I'd be much more confident in them. But as it currently stands, you would have Sri Lanka as favorites. But I don't think you should be that shocked if Sri Lanka don't beat the Netherlands. A little bit, Netherlands, with that, quite rarely had their full strength team during their home summer. They played some really good cricket. I think they should have won a lot more games than they probably did in that summer. So they're not a bad team at all. Let's have a look. Not to mention rain. Rain's the other thing there that you need to be worried about as well. C Square says, I feel like Namibia could really do with a specialist batter who can capitalize on the power play. I mean, I don't think they have that player. I don't think that I don't think that they'd be sitting there disagreeing with you at all. I just don't think that they specifically have that player. It's funny. I haven't seen them play a lot of one-day cricket. I might have seen a couple of games here and there at times, but they really do, when I look at them, really profile like a one-day team, a bit like Ireland, I suppose, where you look at them and you just go, yeah, I could see how this works better in one-day cricket than it potentially does in T20 cricket. And they just don't have that explosiveness. I've been surprised that I suppose they did rejig the order around, but, with David Weiser, I kind of wonder if they should throw him up the order, but I suppose he's not good enough against spin consistently, that they kind of think that the best thing is for him to come in the last 4 to 5 overs. But they haven't really got much out of him. He failed in the first game, and in the second game, what did he face, 5 or 6 balls or something? But at the same time, they know their lineup better than we do, and they'll know their strengths and weaknesses. My guess is they don't want to put him up the order, but he is probably a class above some of the other players, and I think he puts more fear into the bowling team. I think we saw that at times in the last World Cup when he went up the order. It wasn't so much that he was outstanding; it's just the team started going, "Okay, we've got to think about this." Whereas the normal Namibian batters just don't put that kind of pressure on them at all. Amatesh says, "Can UAE beat Namibia?" Yes, because I don't think Namibia can blow them out of the water. UAE had a bad game today, but even then they pulled Sri Lanka back, didn't they? So I would say that Netherlands and Sri Lanka both underscored against UAE, and both times that was because, well, Mayapan played a role, but certainly a bigger role in the Sri Lanka game, and Siddiqui got reverse swing in the other one. My worry is whether they have the ability to consistently make runs, the UAE team, but I do think they have 2 or 3 guys who could make runs in one game, so they can certainly put pressure on them. Arbaz has said, "What is the weather in Melbourne?" Doesn't matter because the game's being played in Geelong. I know it's kind of Melbourne, but I just want to make that joke as much as anything. Simon says, any prediction for tomorrow's matches? Ireland versus Scotland and Zimbabwe versus West Indies. So Ireland versus Scotland, I checked the odds. So Ireland are favoured in that game at the moment. I'm not sure I think of Ireland as a better T20 team than Scotland. On the back of that other game, Scotland were a little bit scratchy with the bat at times, but they capitalised on the times that West Indies weren't very good. And one of those was in the death. I'm not a big fan of Ireland's death bowling as well. But Ireland is probably a better upfront bowling lineup than the West Indies is. So perhaps they can put more pressure on Scotland in that way. I think that if Scotland's batting lineup is fully firing, it's probably a much better batting lineup than Ireland's is. But Ireland do play a lot more top-level cricket, and those things do matter, whether they matter in a one-off game, but they matter overall. So I probably would go with Scotland. I would have had Scotland as mild favourites ahead of Ireland in that one. Zimbabwe, West Indies is really, really interesting. What if the Zimbabwean seamers can get on top? I think they're every chance. I think West Indies should win just because they were embarrassed and they should bounce back at this point. But I really like Zimbabwe. I suppose the only way that you can back Zimbabwe to beat the West Indies is really to say that Roz is going to have another big game in him, and 2 in a row is maybe asking a little bit too much of him from that point. But I suppose I would say the West Indies will win, but I think Zimbabwe should be in that game. That would be my best bet. So I'd go Scotland, West Indies, based on that. Those I've said before, it's a bit of a toss-up league group, that one. But I did think that the West Indies and Scotland were the two most likely to go through. Maybe not as much, but I'll just see if there's anything else I can answer. Do you see? Gapati Dilip says, do you see any teams competing outside of India, England, and Australia by the time the next T20? By the time the next T20 rolls around, yeah, well, Pakistan and South Africa are quite good. Obviously, Sri Lanka are building something. I think this is a tournament too early for them, which I kind of said in the preview, and I suppose that's kind of been lived up to so far. But yeah, no, I mean, I think if you've got Shaheen Afridi and you've got a top order like Pakistan, they should be in a lot of games, plus the rest of their bowlers and Shadab Khan and those sorts of players. South Africa's bowling attack isn't going anywhere. New Zealand have a lot of young batting talent that I don't think we've seen the best of at international cricket yet. So, yeah, there's definitely there's some fun out there with those things. Jay says you were biased to Scotland. I mean, mate, I've been covering Ireland cricket for longer than I even knew the names of anyone from Scottish cricket. So let's just chill out there. I've got probably as many, if not more, friends from Irish cricket than I do from Scottish cricket. So cool your jets, little man. Amitesh says Josh Little is good. Yeah, we talked about him on yesterday's show. I still think he's just a raw player, but I was trying to think of. I'm not sure there's that many other 11s that he walks into of the higher up teams. But having said that, I do honestly believe that on raw ability, there's a few 11s out there that would be looking at him. Oh, I'm getting weird sun here now. Sorry, everyone. I think there's a few other 11s that would. Sorry, a few other squads and a few other teams that would like to have a player like him coming through. There's no doubt there. Thank you, everyone. Obviously, I'll cut this one a little bit shorter today, but we should be back with a full episode again tomorrow. If you are interested, we've got West Indies 99.94, South Africa 99.94, India 99.94, and Sri Lanka 99.94. I think have all put episodes out of recent times. Probably England as well. there's a lot of our shows. Edges and Sledges put out their big World Cup preview, which I was part of as well. And there's bunches of new shows coming up that I'll be announcing over the next couple of days as well. But thank you again for coming in and watching and chatting and everything else. And I'll see you tomorrow. Well, I'll be in a house, hopefully. And the World Cup will be in Hobart. I'll see you then.